Cool. All right, before I begin, I'd like to start off by thanking Urban here and Demi for all the hard work they've been doing behind the scenes, the cameramen too. You guys are doing a great job, and I'm so excited to be the first THUAS presenter. So I want to begin, before everything, by going back to intro week, right? So for some of you, it may have been a few years ago, but for me, it was a few months ago, and it's still fresh in my mind. It was the most fascinating experience. I've met people from all over the world, all over Europe, from Romania, from Hungary, from Cyprus, from Italy. It's an incredible experience. And there's something that stood out to me in this intro week that I didn't expect. As that for all our differences, we really are quite similar. We all share the same identity as students. And that open identity made us super open with each other. These are some of the nicest people I've met in a long time. And it's that kind of identity that I want to talk about today. Now, I'm curious. In case I didn't get to introduce myself to you yet, my name is Aiden Hunt. I'm 17 years old, and I am an ES4 student. I'm a first year. And before I begin, I want to ask here, does anybody know of the country of Belize? I know you guys do. Does anyone else know? Yes? Okay. Belize is a small Central American nation on the Caribbean coast, underneath Mexico and next to Guatemala. And it is one of the most culturally diverse places you will ever be. Honestly, it is incredible. I have a few pictures I'd like to show up. This is me in primary school, and this is also me in primary school a bit later. And something you'll notice is that I don't really blend in to my country much. I don't sound like most Belizeans do either, and that's where I want to bring up something important before I start this speech. I was very privileged. My parents were first-generation immigrants that moved over in 2001 that already had stable careers and were stable financially. This means I didn't experience a lot of the hardships most Belizeans go through, and that has affected me. Me being here in the first place is a privilege. Most Belizeans don't get to study and work outside their country. This is me earlier this year with some of my youth group members, and again, you will see I am the token white guy, but you'll also notice all the different cultures there. They don't have the same shade. They're from all over. So let's talk about the background of Belize a little bit. My parents moved over in 2001, and I was born in 2006, about 20 minutes from the capital, a 20-minute ride through 2 villages on dirt track. I was very disconnected from the wider Belizean community, and I felt this. But I never lost my love of my country. I really loved it, and I still to this day feel Belizean. But this presents a few issues. What does it mean to be Belizean? Well, I've struggled with this identity for a while. Let's go back a little bit even further to our history. Belize was a former British colony. It used to be called British Honduras, and it was an extractive colony. A colony basically that would just send its resources abroad. Most of our capital didn't stay here, and we became very underdeveloped. We still are underdeveloped to this day. In fact, we have a class of people which have been called the forestocracy, another form of aristocracy, which are the few settler families that landed here in the early years to set up logging camps to extract this resource. They are still some of the richest families in the country to this day. But who is Belize? Who are all these different shades of people? Where do they come from? Well, apart from the indigenous Maya, none of these people are local. They're all immigrants. They came over from far stretches of the British Empire, everywhere from China to India, to the Middle East, to the African descendants and the Caribbean islands. They all settled here in Belize as British subjects. But they wouldn't remain British subjects for long. After about 198 years of history, it was past World War II. Decolonization is in full swing, and the question of Belizean independence is no longer if, but when and how. And we have this man to thank for that, a large part. This is our founding father, George Cadle Price. You will read about him in every Belizean history book. Every Belizean can tell you his name by heart. And he was presented with a big problem. What is Belize? Or rather, who is Belize? Now, if you go to any of our neighbors, you'll find that they promoted an ethnic identity. They promoted the mestizo identity. It's a Spanish one. It's where the Spanish conquistadors came over a long time ago, and their descendants have remained the ruling class. If you look at our neighbors, Guatemala, you will notice that there's a lot of history of ethnic violence, a lot of ethnic cleansing and not so nice things. But Belize couldn't go down that route. We decided that we would create a new identity based on ideals that would have to transcend ethnicity entirely. And so we took after our cousins up north in the United States of America. We took after the founding fathers. A lot of our institutions are very similar to US institutions. A lot of the people see the US as an example of prosperity. Our dollars, Belizean dollars, are directly tied to the US dollars. Our military is supported by it. And almost all of the tourists that you'll see in Belize with fat wallets are all American. So we've always seen the US as an example of what to mimic. But there was a problem. Has anyone here heard of the butterfly effect before? Yeah, it's not an uncommon term. It's when one small effect, one small event has drastic impacts on our country. And one small event devastated our country in 1961. We have hurricanes in Belize. I've lived through many of them. They're terrifying. Houses are destroyed. And in 1961, Hurricane Hattie roared through our capital, Belize City. It destroyed 75% of the housing, making a new class of people in the city even poorer than poor. And that's where our good relationship with the US came in handy. They opened their doors. They let us in. They let thousands of Belizeans migrate to LA, where they settled in predominantly poor, low-income neighborhoods. But if you know anything about LA, the 70s and the 80s are going to be a rough time. In the 70s and the 80s, you have the war on drugs, and you have the rise of street gangs, which Belizeans are a part of. However, because they're not US citizens, many get deported back to a country unprepared to deal with them. So a lot of these Belizeans who grew up on the rough streets of LA found themselves roaming the rough streets of Belize City. And the media has created a term for them called generals. And they're called generals because they go back to their home country and start their own armies. They start their own gangs, which are all either blood or Crip affiliated. They take after the US gangs and the violence that is very unique to the US. Everyone agrees in our country that this is when crime peaks. This is when it started. And we didn't really have a history of violence, or at least really brutal violence before this. And still, it affects our country to this day. As a privileged person, I can't claim to have been affected by it, but I certainly know people who have. I know family friends whose families have been murdered because of this kind of stuff. It's not a joke. It's not the cool kind of hip-hop gangster, the stuff you see on TV. It is petty, tit for tat. You kill my brother, I kill your cousin. And so there's a new type of Belize that I want to get to. Because while this violence is in the background, it isn't what Belize is. At our core, we are a united country of people who do get along. And the internet has been an amazing step for this. The adoption of the internet was widespread across Belize, and especially during times such as COVID, I saw a peak, I saw a soar. We were all stuck at home, all across the world. But us especially in Belize. I mean, a lot of people can't go out and do much in the country in the first place. There isn't much to do. So we are avid social media users, and the adoption of the internet has made us more aware of where we stand on the world stage, even strengthening that identity more. Who here watches football? Just day-to-day watches football, an avid football watcher, yeah? And who tunes in to watch how their country does in the World Cup? A lot more people. We like to see how our countries act on the world stage. It's important. It's so core to founding an identity. And so where does this leave us today? We have a new group of Belizeans who can't really call themselves one ethnic group or another. They can't claim to just be Creole or just be Mestizo or be Mayan. They're a mix of everything. It would be a bit rude to call them mutts, but that's basically what we're becoming. It's a new group of people being created at this very moment with each new generation. It's fascinating. And so there's a new type of Belizean, two types, that I'm a part of. You have the restless, and you have the content. I consider myself to be part of the restless, the part of the people that want more opportunity. They go abroad for work. They go abroad to study. I have the luxury of being able to go abroad to study and to do these things. But the fact is, most Belizeans can't. Most Belizeans don't have the money. They don't have the opportunities. But then there's also the content. While the ambitious go abroad to learn more about the world and to bring this expertise back to their country in a few years, I mean, I know many people who've illegally crossed the US border. They stay there for a few years, low-key, work, and they come back to bring the money to their families. That's very common. But then there's those who stay, the content. They're happy where they are. They live day to day, and they know everyone. As a small country, you know everyone. And that means the lows are certainly low, but the highs are high. People love the communities, and people are often scared to leave them. And so these two communities, these two groups of Belizeans, the content and the restless, go abroad and come back, but ultimately never forget where they came from. If you know me, if you're one of my friends, you'll know I do not shut up about Belize, and I don't think I ever will, because it is an example that I think every country can learn a thing or two about, especially those who are dealing with ethnic conflicts. Because for all the gang violence we may have, and for all the unpleasant parts of Belizean life, it is still a beautiful, untouched gem in Central America. And I'd like to finish off now with a quote. And unfortunately, I can't for the life of me find out who said it, but it summarizes what it means to be Belizean beautifully. Quote, "In Belize, we sing in Garifuna, we talk in Creole, we study in English, and we curse each other out in Spanish." And if that's not a beautiful way to describe our country, then I don't know what is. My name is Aiden Hunt. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Yes?